The terrifying tale of the Everhart Sisters, the haunted brothel where 90 women disappeared. I never should have opened that door. It was just another late night in the city, the kind where shadows stretch long and the air grows thick with whispers of the unseen. I was covering the haunted Everhart brothel story, you know, the one that sent shivers down spines, the very place where 90 women vanished without a trace. Each one like smoke carried away by the wind, leaving only mystery behind. Papers littered the table in my cramped apartment, crinkling under my frantic fingers. The stories had been wild, each as outrageous as the last. They said the walls themselves whispered their secrets. The brothel stood on a forgotten street, cloaked in darkness, dust swirling like phantom memories. It was cold there, even in summer, that kind of chill that digs into your bones. I could almost hear the sighs of spirits trapped within, endlessly echoing their pain and regret. What was it about that place? Eyewitnesses claimed they'd seen fleeting shadows in the windows, dark figures darting just out of sight. Some swore they heard laughter, light and carefree like a distant echo of something long lost. Others spoke of an overwhelming sadness that flooded the halls, drowning the merriment that once thrived there. No one truly knew what had driven the women to disappear. Did they slip into the night like phantoms, or was there something waiting for them in the midnight gloom? I was lost in thought when the trembling began. The air thickened and a sound broke through the silence. A low creak. My heart raced. I glanced around my dimly lit room, shadows shifting ominously in the corners. I should have felt safe here, but dread tightened like a vice. Goosebumps raced across my arms as I remembered the eerie tales, the warnings of what lurked in the forgotten spaces of the Everhart brothel. That I pushed the thoughts away, forcing myself to focus. But the noise grew louder. Objects shifted slightly, as if something unseen was moving just out of my line of sight, teasing me, almost inviting me in. I took a breath, heart hammering. Then, a sudden crash echoed from outside. A scream sliced through the night, piercing the chill. Was it a figment of my fear? Or something much worse? The darkness outside seemed to pulse, alive with whispers of terror. And I knew, deep down, I was headed straight into it. A shadow fell across my doorway. It loomed, tall and dark. I barely had time to breathe before I whipped around, eyes wide. My pulse raced, every instinct screaming to run, but I was frozen, locked in horror. What would step through that door? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door creaked open, revealing only the vast void beyond, a yawning abyss that seemed to swallow the light whole. It was an invitation laced with malice, and the air grew thick with an oppressive chill. My skin prickled, and suddenly, the fevered whispers from the stories I had heard crashed over me like waves, tales of women whose laughter had turned to wails, trapped souls forever seeking escape, only to be ensnared by a darkness that thrived on despair. Who's there? I barely recognized my own voice, a thin falter that hung in the air, wavering beneath the weight of terror. The silhouette lingered, and for a heartbeat, everything fell silent except for my ragged breathing, the tension so thick it felt almost tangible. Then, it stepped forward, a dark, cloaked figure with no discernible face, just an empty space where features should have been. I could feel its gaze upon me, cold and insatiable, as if it were stripping away my defenses, exposing something raw and undefended within. Instinct propelled me backward, but my feet seemed glued to the floorboards. Memories of the Everhart brothel flooded my mind, the ghostly lamentations, the cries of the vanished women that echoed through time. I was stepping closer to something I might never return from, entangled in a nightmare formed by the very fears I tried to suppress. Help them, it whispered, a voice like the rustle of dead leaves, spinning tales of sorrow woven with desperation. You are the key. Find them before they vanish like the rest. That my heart thudded violently against my ribcage, each beat cleaner than the last as realization struck. I recognized that voice. It was the same one that haunted my dreams, a sound that pulled at the threads of my existence, urging me toward the chasm of the unknown. "Who do you want me to help?" I dared ask, my voice trembling, though a part of me urged for clarity. The figure was my only connection to the mystery, and I needed answers. The Everhart Sisters, it breathed, an echo that seemed to peel away layers of my perception. 90 souls bound to this plane, lost to the darkness that feasts on their memories. Find them, and perhaps you can save yourself. Suddenly, the shadows deepened, stretching and coiling around the figure, wrapping it tighter with each word, until it melded with the darkness, vanishing completely. I staggered, gasping as the air thickened with a heavy stillness, as if the world itself held its breath. I stumbled back against my desk, knocking over a stack of papers that fluttered to the ground like restless spirits. And just beyond a cobwebbed window, the moon illuminated something grotesque. Faces, hundreds of them, pressing against the glass, mouths contorted in silent screams, their eyes wide with unrelenting fear and longing. I spun away in horror, letting out a choked gasp. The very women I had read about, their anguished eyes directed toward Muir, they truly trapped within this very moment. Their ethereal forms fading in and out of focus, each one begging for more than just acknowledgement, but desperate for release. A sound drew my attention: footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing in the corridor outside my apartment. I instinctively reached for my phone, but it was gone, vanished like the women I sought to understand. The knock that followed sent my heart racing again, echoing with an urgency that demanded I answer. "Open the door," a voice murmured, familiar yet distorted, dripping with unsettling temptation. It was a voice I had heard on the streets, the one that had whispered my name while I drifted in and out of consciousness, drawing me back to the shadows. "You can't run from the Everhart Sisters. They need you." With each word, reality warped around me, causing the room to teeter and sway. I could feel their presence gathering, 100 souls whispering, urging me, pleading with me to join them, even as I fought against the overwhelming wave of dread that threatened to consume me whole. The darkness lurked beyond the door, promising answers but also another layer of horror I might not survive, and in that moment, the door swung open, revealing nothing but a veil of darkness, beckoning me closer. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind as I felt hands begin to grip at my wrists, pulling me into a spiraling descent that felt like it would never end. "Help us," they cried in unison, a sound that shattered the silence, echoing in my soul. "You must find the key," and then, as I slipped into the void, something tightened around my throat, a cold grip that offered no escape. I was not alone anymore. The screaming began anew. The screams reverberated in my ears, drowning out everything else, an unbearable cacophony of desperation and grief. The hands on my wrists tightened with a bone-chilling intensity, propelling me deeper into the suffocating darkness. I could feel the weight of their anguish pressing against me, a smothering shroud woven from the threads of their unfinished lives. Flashes of images plagued my mind, frantic scenes of women in vintage clothing, once vibrant and full of life, now mere shadows flickering before my eyes. They danced and laughed, but the joy was hollow, stripped of warmth and hope. The joyous music that surrounded them twisted into a dissonant wail, a cruel reminder of what had been stolen from them. "Help us!" They cried again, a thunderous chorus that echoed against the void, merging their voices into a haunting melody that bled into the darkness. More hands emerged, caressing my skin with a coldness that pierced to the bone, dragging me back to the brothel, back to the heart of their torment. Suddenly, I was standing before an ornate mirror, shattered and streaked with grime. As I gazed into its depths, my own reflection stared back, but behind it loomed something far more sinister, a figure swathed in shadow, darting in and out of sight. I recoiled, feeling an electric pulse of fear course through me, but the women's voices urged me to look deeper. "Please," they implored, "find the key." That I pressed my palms against the glass, the surface rippling as though it were water. The shadow within began to take form, twisting and writhing, revealing a face that sent icy fingers of dread slithering down my spine. It had no features, just an elongated mouth that curved into a grotesque grin. "You're closer than you think," it hissed, the words slithering into my ear like venom. Just then, darkness surged around me, the voices morphing into shrieks of panic. The floor below buckled and groaned as if the very building itself felt the weight of their sorrow. I staggered backward, suddenly breaking free of the grip on my wrists, yet the sensation of hollow eyes watching me anew almost made me fall once again. As I stumbled across the room, trying to piece together the nightmare unfurling before me, a sharp pain pierced my side. I glanced down to find a dark, luminescent object lodged there, glowing eerily, a small key crafted from twisted metal, its shape jagged and incomplete. It pulsed with a rhythm that surged like a heartbeat, vibrating with unseen energy. The moment I grasped it, the shrieks intensified, erupting like a wave crashing down upon me, enveloping me in their frenzied need. "That is the key!" A voice erupted above the clamor. A woman, her presence cutting through the shadows, radiant yet heart-wrenching. "You must unlock the doorway to our past, but do not delay. The darkness wants you." Before I could respond, the floor beneath me quaked violently, and I was thrown to the ground. As the mirror shattered entirely, the figure stepped free, its features now discernible only. They were mine, grotesque and distorted, as if mocking my very essence. "Help us," I heard from behind, a thin sound tinged with madness. I turned to see a throng of faces emerging from the darkness behind me, eyes wide and pleading, chaos swirling like a tempest as they clawed towards me, their sighs mingling with the oppressive air. Suddenly, the initial figure lunged, reaching for me with hollow gestures, and my heart raced as I felt the abyss threatening to swallow me whole. Time felt like it dilated, every heartbeat echoed painfully as I clutched the key tighter, a drowning man grasping a fragile lifeline. And then, with a rush of wind, the women surged closer, their spectral forms moving as one, each desperate to grasp what remained of their unrealized lives. In that moment, the warmth around the key shifted, and I could feel a dark energy burgeoning, no longer just a tool, but an alchemical force drawing the women closer, intertwining their essences with it. With a sudden lurch, the floor disintegrated beneath me. I fell into the abyss, the key slipping from my grasp, fading into the darkness below. "Don't leave us," they wailed, their agony palpable, the despair wrapping around me like chains. As the last remnants of my vision faded to black, a chilling whisper clawed at the edges of my awareness, the voice of the very darkness that pursued me. "You will help them or join them." And just before everything went silent, the key ignited one last time, light exploding into the void, revealing something monstrous lurking just beyond reach. Something that hungered. I drew a breath of darkness, wondering whether I was truly lost or merely on the brink of becoming something far worse. As the darkness enveloped me, a suffocating pressure crushed my lungs, constricting my body in a way that felt both unreal and familiar. I was falling, not just through air but through memories twisted into a chaos of sorrow, each second pulling me deeper into a vortex of anguish. I grasped for anything to hold on to, but the abyss clawed at me, teasing me with the sound of faint whispers. Then the world around me shifted. The descent halted abruptly, and I landed with a dull thud. The soft, damp earth soaked through my clothes, a visceral reminder that I wasn't merely dreaming. I opened my eyes slowly, squinting against a cold, spectral light that illuminated a narrow corridor lined with cracked, peeling wallpaper. The faint scent of decay wrapped around me, mingling with something metallic, as if the walls had drunk deep from the blood of those who once inhabited this cursed place. Am I? The question hung in the air, echoing off the walls, but there was no response. I felt a haunting presence draw closer, lingering just beyond the flickering shadows. Heart racing, I pushed myself up and followed the corridor, compelled by an unyielding urge to find the key that had slipped from my grasp. Whispers skimmed the edge of my hearing, weaving in and out of focus. "Help us." The voices were soft yet insistent, carried on a chilling breeze that seemed to brush against my skin like icy fingers. "You must dive deeper." With each step, the ground beneath my feet crumbled, cascading into the void from which I had fallen. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of tortured souls trapped in a cycle of despair. Some voices were familiar, echoing words I had heard before, while others were alien, raw and primal. "Find the house," they urged, "the house will reveal the truth." A shiver raced down my spine, but the allure of unfinished promises pulled me onward, deeper into the heart of darkness. I turned a corner, and the corridor opened into a vast hall, cavernous and foreboding. And there it stood, the abandoned brothel, its silhouette grotesque, a shadow against the feeble light that struggled to penetrate the gloom. The very air shuddered with a palpable sense of dread, as if the building itself was alive, breathing in sync with the pulsating dread that surrounded me. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked ominously behind me. I felt the weight of dread settle over my shoulders like a suffocating cloak. I turned slowly, adrenaline surging as I searched the room. Dust motes danced in the air, swirling under the faint shimmer of an unseen light, but there was something else moving amidst the chaos: figures, vaguely humanoid, cloaked in shifting shadows. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural brightness, woodpecker pecks against the loveless silence, drawing nearer. "Help us," they cried in chorus, but their voices now bore a tone of anguish and betrayal, as if I was the one who had wronged them. Panic surged through me, and I took a step back, only to find myself against the cold wall of the brothel. Through the blackened windows, I glimpsed the jagged skyline of a forgotten city, and the shapes outside twisted and expanded like phantoms, beckoning for release. "Find the house," they screamed again, clawing at the air. "Uncover the lies." With trembling hands, I felt a sharp tug, and across the dimly lit hall, old portraits adorned the walls, beautiful women captured in time, their gazes both haunting and pleading. One woman, with her flowing hair and vibrant dress, appeared to whisper secrets through cracked lips. The key burned against my side, a reminder of the promise I had yet to fulfill. Then, a low growl emerged from the depths of the hall, resonating through my bones. Shadows thickened and coalesced into a malevolent presence, a gnarled shape shadowed with malice, rising from beneath the floorboards. "You have come to end our suffering," it rasped, its voice a slithering whisper dripping with menace. "But your path is scattered with the bones of the lost." As the creature lurched forward, its eyes fused into my gaze, I saw within them echoes of the souls that once called this place home. The image of the woman in the portrait flashed in my mind, and something deep within her pulled at the threads of my memory. "Help us!" they echoed once more, the shrieks merging into a wrathful storm that skewered the air with desperation, and in that moment, the wall behind me shuddered violently, splintering open, revealing a dark passageway that beckoned with a pulsating glow. I was torn between the monstrosity in front of me and the siren call of the unknown. As the shadows lunged toward me, every instinct screamed to run toward the passage. But as I turned to flee, the embrace of the dark tendrils encircled me, pulling me back, a vice of dread. No. I screeched, panic bubbling within me, desperate to reach the light, but as the darkness closed around me, I realized the horrifying truth: I was not merely the one who could free them, I was entwined in their fate. The icy grip tightened, and as the last vestiges of hope faded, a chilling promise echoed in my mind: "You will share our pain," and the world erupted in a blinding flash, before spiraling into an all-consuming void. The void clutched at me, a throbbing pulse of despair that stretched time and space into an agony of endless shadows. I gasped, reeling as I was cast back into the grasp of that hall, along with a chorus of tortured spirits, their cries blending into a symphony of mournful grief. I was once again face to face with the entity, its features slithering in and out of focus, a grotesque apparition that seemed to feed off my fear. "You walked willingly into our nightmare," it spat, the words slathered with contempt. "Now you will know what it is to be lost." Desperation clawed at my throat as I struggled against the fetid tendrils of shadow that bound me. My heart hammered, a frantic drum announcing my imminent end. But rage surged deeper, igniting a flicker of rebellion within my soul. "Let them go!" I screamed, the plea escaping before the shadows could silence me. "You don't have to keep them." The creature's laughter vibrated through the ground, a sound reminiscent of shattered glass, delighting in the hopelessness I felt. "They belong to me. Here, in this broken sanctuary of regrets, they have been forsaken, just as you shall be." With an unexpected intensity, my instincts rallied, I threw myself against the tendrils, chest heaving as I concentrated with every ounce of willpower. "I will find the truth. You cannot hold us forever." In response, the figures surged forward, eyes burning with anguished memories. "Seek the mirror," they sang out, their voices intertwining like a cacophony of wind through autumn leaves. "The truth lies within." As the shadows tightened their grip, I finally caught sight of a cracked mirror at the far end of the hall, its surface warped and splattered with dark stains. The edges trembled, illuminating fragments of memories I could scarcely comprehend: wives mourning husbands, young girls taken without a trace, and mothers searching for their lost children. Was it possible that within the haunting reflection lay the key to freeing them? With a surge of determination, I whipped my head back toward the apparition, its gnarled fingers looming ever closer. "You cannot decide what my fate shall be," I bellowed, refusing to bow to the terror it conjured. And with one final heave, I broke free from the darkness that encircled me. I sprinted down the hall, heart pounding in rhythm to the frantic whispers urging me forward, the magnetic pull of the mirror becoming my only focus. The shadows lashed out, tendrils clawing at my legs, trying to drag me down, but I pressed on, adrenaline pushing me beyond my limits. When I reached the mirror, my heart fell into a pit of despair. The surface pulsed with a life of its own, reflecting phantoms of women long forgotten, trapped within its confines, their faces contorted in sorrow. I reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed against cold glass. Suddenly, a spine-chilling howl erupted from the creature behind me, and I spun around just in time to find it towering, anger brimming in its ghostly visage. "You must not!" it roared, the walls shaking with its fury. "You will release things you cannot comprehend." Before I could answer, the mirror flickered, and a voice, sweet yet drenched in sorrow, beckoned to me. "Help us," it implored, filled with raw urgency. "You must before it is too late." The choice loomed before me, fierce and cruel. But as I stared into the depths of the mirror, a sudden rush of understanding surged through me. The mirror held more than reflections, it cradled the very essence of each lost soul, their stories woven into a tapestry of cruel fate. Then, without warning, the room erupted in chaos. The entity lunged, a twisting mass of shadows and rage, as I slipped one hand into the mirror, feeling the cool glass transform into a liquid oblivion. I could nearly taste freedom, nearly touch the past, but something dark and sinister reached out, a last-ditch effort to drag me back, a final plea to preserve the suffering trapped within this cursed home. And just then, the mirror shattered beneath my grasp, splintering into shards that glimmered with an eerie light, each fragment holding a life stolen, a cry for help unheeded. "What have you done?" the creature howled, as fragments began to swirl around me, the cries of those lost enveloping me like a whirlwind. Shadows twisted in agony, revealing their grotesque forms, and I understood in that horrifying moment I had ignited a truth buried too long, one that would unravel the very fabric of this accursed place. Before I could comprehend my next move, the shattered shards imploded into a blinding light, and as darkness swallowed me whole once more, the last sound I heard was an echo of a familiar voice, pleading and powerful, resonating within me: "Finish what you started before it finds you." Then silence. The world around me dissolved into nothingness, the emptiness promising a new horror yet to unfold. The void opened like a gaping maw, drawing me into an abyss of swirling shadows and uncertain echoes. I stood breathless, disoriented, the flickering remnants of the shattered mirror still bright in my mind. Each shard seemed to pulse with the energy of lost souls, and I felt a haunting pull toward them. The whispers had grown louder now, a symphony of pleading voices echoing through the darkness, saturating my being with urgency and despair. Suddenly, the landscape morphed around me, the tender embrace of nothingness replaced by a dismal room. The walls were draped in faded, tattered wallpaper, patterned with wilting roses that seemed to reach out for help. This space, suffocated by its own desolation, was heavy with the stench of mildew, old secrets, and unfulfilled promises. The bitter taste of dread filled my mouth as I slowly comprehended where I had landed, the very brothel whispered about in town. The haunting tales of the Everhart Sisters, long steeped in rumors of disappeared women, surged in my mind like a tidal wave, filling me with an overwhelming sense of loss. The air crackled with suspense, as if the building itself was a sentient thing, waiting for my next move. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I stepped forward, their protesting groan a reminder of the stories embedded within. I could feel the shadows coiling around me, each one alive with its own history, a tapestry of suffering, loss, and unspeakable horrors that had unfolded within these walls. I was not alone, the remnants of those who had come and gone lingered, their manifestations flitting just beyond the edge of my vision, with the whispers escalating into desperate cries, my heart pounded in sympathy for their plight. I moved towards a doorway on the far side of the room, drawn by a flicker of hope, but as I approached, the door slammed shut with an ear-splitting bang, rattling the very foundations of my sanity. The force of it knocked me back, breath hitching in my throat, as I clutched the door handle, willing it to yield. A low, sinister laughter resonated from the shadows, vibrating through my bones. You think you can free them? You are but a moth drawn to the flame. The words were thick with malice, wrapping around me until I felt their suffocation. It was then I understood the entity's true nature. It was the malevolence tethered to this place, feeding on the despair contained within its walls. Let them go. I shouted, voice shaking as outrage surged through me once more. I could feel the presence of the women pressing closer, their sorrow darkening the air until it became suffocating. They are mine, it hissed, shifting from shadow to shadow, its form coiling around me like smoke, appearing both grotesque and mesmerizing. Once they are released, only suffering will remain. The truth you seek will become your doom. My pulse quickened as I recalled the spirit's last words, echoing in my mind, finish what you started. But how? I looked around the room desperately, my eyes landing on a decrepit dresser in the corner, its mirror intact yet cloudy with a layer of dust. Driven by instinct, I rushed toward it, hoping against all odds that it might revert to the power I had just unleashed, but as my fingers touched the glass, the surface rippled, and I was seized by a disordered montage of tragedies hidden behind a veil of decay. I saw the Everhart Sisters, their laughter masked by cruelty, coiling the lives of their victims into a macabre cycle of despair. Each woman banished within these walls, spirits rebelling against their fate yet bound to the brothel by a bond of suffering that twisted and knotted around their very souls. As the vision receded, a figure emerged from the shadows, jointed limbs trembling in pain. She bore the faint resemblance of those I had glimpsed in the mirror prior, wisps of a woman trapped between two worlds. We were taken, she rasped, hand reaching for me, fingers outstretched and unsteady. You must understand, before it is too late, the entity shrieked, furious and unrelenting, hurling shadows toward me like jagged daggers. Enough. You will not listen to their lies. They are cursed to wander forever. In that heartbeat, clarity ignited within me, a scorching fire in the depths of my soul. No more. I bellowed, driving my palms against the mirror once more, surging toward the essence of truth that lay inside. But the force of darkness erupted in a final desperate attack, narrowing my vision as shadows entwined, squeezing tighter around my throat as the room warped into a spiraling vortex of chaos. Do not be a martyr. The words careened around me, merging with the anguished cries of women, building in volume until they surged toward a climactic crescendo. You will join us. You will know our pain. And with that unrelenting howl, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, beautiful and dreadful, each shard reflecting faces of the lost, of lives unearthed but not yet free, scattering across the wooden floor and bathing the room in an ethereal glow. In a moment of powerful realization, I understood the pain of the Everhart Sisters was my own to carry now. The revelation crashed over me like icy water, raw and unyielding. Before I could process what had just transpired, the fractured glass swirled around my feet, drawing me into an inevitable descent, a plunge into the bleak void where secrets lurked and the true horror of this tale awaited, and as my scream escaped into the darkness, the impending dread loomed larger, echoing the voice of the apparition like a dreadful omen in the dark. Your fate has only just begun. As the shards settled around me, the darkness clung to my skin like a cold sweat, viscous and unrelenting. I was no longer standing in the brothel. Instead, I found myself submerged in a nightmarish labyrinth of broken corridors and dimly lit rooms. Each doorway whispered promises of terrible truths and unspoken horrors, the air thick with a sense of foreboding that prickled against my flesh. The walls seemed to pulse with life, thrumming in synchrony with the whispers of countless voices recounting their tales of sorrow. Help us, the voices pleaded, a disembodied choir echoing through the halls. The continuous refrain grew from a whisper to a crescendo, swirling around me in a tempest of agony. Recognizing the faces reflected in the shards during the vision, I struggled to breathe as their essence crowded my mind, a sea of lost souls, rendered mute in their suffering, each one blinking into existence, desperate for liberation. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward, propelled into the shadows that beckoned me closer. A shuddering breath escaped my lips as I staggered into a lavishly adorned chamber, faded velvet drapery hanging limply from the walls, remnants of an opulence that had long since disintegrated. Tattered doll heads adorned a musty shelf, their cracked porcelain gazes wide with horror, and a grandfather clock ticked relentlessly in the corner, but no sound came of its movement. Time itself felt like a cruel trick, suspended in this grotesque tableau. "Do you remember us?" a voice crooned, sultry and tinged with despair. I spun around, every instinct screaming at me to flee, but the sight held me in thrall. A woman dressed in a tattered gown appeared before me, her beauty marred by a ghostly pallor. We were the Everhart Sisters. Once beloved, now forgotten. From the shadowy recesses emerged other figures, remnants of those who had been entangled in the horrifying legacy of this place. Their faces flickered, shifting between the resplendent life they once knew and the despair that now defined their existence. I staggered back, clutching my head as their voices crescendoed, drowning my thoughts, melding into a cacophony of pain and regret. "Join us," they implored, a haunting melody that pulled at the very fabric of my spirit. An overwhelming sense of sorrow washed over me, unbearable and corrosive. The mirrored remnants scattered at my feet glistened, drawing me to their fractured reflections of despair. For a fleeting moment, I saw scenes unfold, a woman shackled in a room, shackles and used merely for decoration, forever imprisoned in her own memories, laughter echoing chaotically, only to snuff out with cries, a twisted dance of theatricality where joy turned to terror, and the flickering of candle flames casting shadows upon faces twisted with hopelessness. "What do I need to do?" I uttered, my voice barely above a whisper as I felt the weight of their collective grief press against my chest, straining my resolve. "Free us, and the truth will be revealed," the lead sister urged. "But tread carefully, for the darkness is aware of your presence and will ensnare you." As if on cue, an icy breath swept through the room, extinguishing whatever flicker of hope resided within. Beads of unnatural sweat rolled down my spine as the entity that had loomed over me began to take form, its grotesque visage manifesting from the shades enveloping the walls. It slithered through the air, undulating with malice, its hollow eyes fixated upon me, a predator in the realm of the damned. "Foolish child," it hissed. "You think you can free them? You only draw closer to despair." The air choked with its rancid laughter, a sound that wrapped around me like barbed wire. "They are my loyal playthings, bound to me forever." With heart hammering, I turned to the sisters, their faces twisted in horror as the darkness encroached upon me. "Fight it," they urged through clenched teeth, desperation pooling in their eyes. "The bond must be severed," the looming entity's voice thundered in the room, distorting the very fabric of reality, rattling the walls before. "The clock strikes midnight, you will lose your chance to break the curse. Join my ranks, embrace your despair." Its form lunged toward me, tendrils of shadow diving to ensnare my limbs as my heart raced. I braced against the force, clawing my way toward the sisters, toward freedom, but the maelstrom of darkness tightened around me like chains, yanking me into its abyss. "Find the key," growled the eldest sister, pain saturating her voice as she strained against the grip of shadowy tendrils. "There lies hope." Instinctively, I gazed toward the grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging deliberately, mocking my desperation. If the clock held a secret, then time might indeed be the only key that could sever their chains. Before I could take a step, the entity shrieked, a deafening sound that shattered glass and rattled my bones. "No! You will not escape me!" The world began to crumble, disintegrating around me as I was engulfed in darkness, my vision narrowing, the echoes of screams morphing into howling winds of despair. And then, just when I thought I was lost forever, I felt something within the void stir a flicker of light, a pulsating warmth that promised salvation. The clock's haunting tick echoed within my heart, guiding me toward the core of truth hidden in the gathering shadows. But as I fought against the tide, two cold hands gripped my shoulders, and I turned to find myself face to face with a reflection of my own haunted visage from the depth of the shadows. Another me stepped forth, eyes wild and brimming with despair. "Why have you come? You cannot save them," I heard myself whisper, a chill creeping through my bones. And with that terrible realization, I knew that the darkness had already claimed part of me. What would remain by the time the clock struck? Would I become yet another lost soul within this accursed place? Before I could confront the horror of my own transformation, the world around me shattered anew, and the remnants of every lost dream spilled forth, enveloping me in their inexorable grasp. The darkness pressed heavily against my skin, squeezing the air from my lungs as fragments of memory and shadow converged into an agonizing maelstrom. I was pulled into a vortex that spiraled ceaselessly around me, mirroring the chaos I felt within. Ghostly faces whispered my name, their familiar tones laced with sorrow, vying to latch onto the fragments of my own consciousness. "Help me," one voice cried, a child's voice, breaking through the cacophony like shattered glass, sending shards of ice spiraling through my heart. I fought a wave of nausea as I grasped at the tendrils of shadow that sought to draw me into depths uncharted, forced to confront that haunting echo of my own innocence lost. "Please, don't leave me," the little girl pleaded, her tiny fingers reaching toward me from the abyss that beckoned. I could see her hair tousled, eyes wide with fear tethered to the hands of an unseen entity that encircled her. Terror rooted me to the spot, but a sudden surge of defiance propelled me forward. "That I won't abandon you," I shouted into the veiled gloom, the sound swallowed by an eerie silence. I lunged, grasping for her, but my hands passed through the shadows separating us as though they were vapor. The child's face contorted, merging with the writhing darkness until she became one with the anguish swirling around me. "Free us," the Everhart sisters' voices echoed again, now layered beneath the unsettling whispers of the horrid entity. "The key lies within the secrets of this house," the clock's relentless ticking mocked me, its hands moving to signal the approach of midnight. The ominous warning echoed in my skull. Fate had bound me to this malevolent haunt, and every tick drew me closer to an inevitable confrontation. I turned back toward the sisters, their forms now flickering, teetering between existence and oblivion. "Well, anchor you," they pleaded, extending their spectral hands, their expressions a blend of raw emotion, a mixture of hope and fear. "But you must let go of what you thought you knew. The truth can't be forced, only revealed." At that moment, the room quaked, shadows creeping along the walls like insidious vines, seeking to ensnare any glimmer of light. I felt the overwhelming pull of despair rising within me, mirrored by the anguish of the sisters' once vibrant souls, now flickering like dying stars in an unfathomable night. The very walls around us began to ooze an unholy ichor that shimmered and sparkled with dreadful allure. Just then, the specter of the dark entity loomed larger, its form now grotesquely tangible, breathing life into the horror I had sensed since my arrival. "You think you can run? You think you can hide?" it taunted, dripping malice with each syllable. "You are as ensnared as they are lost, hopeless. The minute hand draws ever closer to your demise." With a surge of clarity, I sprinted toward the clock, driven by the desperate need to uncover its secret. With every stride, the world tilted, shadows blurring as if reality itself strained to consume me. I thrust my hand toward the clock's face, its ornate design a mockery of time held captive. Something within mean instinct forged from pure dread urged me to find the mechanism that could challenge the curse. "Watch the hourglass, the sand will slip away," the eldest sister cried, urgency carving a furrow in her brow. "It will reveal the way, but be cautious, time itself is part of the curse." My fingers brushed against the cold metal, hovering over the numbers etched into its shell, and in that instant, time shuddered. I could see the grains of sand trapped within, each tiny particle a moment lost to memory, a soul, all bound together in eternal twilight. As the last grain fell, the clock began to rattle violently, sending cold reverberations through my skin. Suddenly, the tether of shadows uncoiled, twisting, writhing, snaking toward me with vengeful intent. I could feel a surge of energy pulse beneath my feet, erupting from the ground as a blinding light ignited the room. "No!" I screamed, my eyes widening as darkness and light clashed around me, forcing me to brace against the imminent collision, and then I saw Ida glimmer of the key ghostly, shimmering with profound energy, hovering before the clock as if beckoning me nearer. My heart raced as I reached out, desperate to claim it. But just as my fingers grazed the cool surface, the wall exploded in a shower of debris, and I was knocked backward into the void of shadows, the key slipping from my grasp. A loud laugh echoed the deep, void-like voice of the entity. "You're too late, child. Embrace your despair." As I lay amidst the wreckage, gasping for breath, the vision of the child returned to haunt my thoughts, her terrified eyes reflecting my own fears and doubts. With the clock ringing loudly, I glimpsed the ghostly forms of the Everhart sisters, stepping back into the darkness, their faces twisted into an eternal scream, and instinctively, I knew then, that the clock was not just a measure of time but a harbinger of doom. I had said I would not abandon the girl, but in that moment, I felt the weight of my own loss pressing down on me, urging me toward despair. The shadows entwined around my limbs as I was pulled toward the consuming void, the last shreds of hope slipping from my grasp like sand through an hourglass. Then, with one final howl of impending doom, I heard her voice again, a faint whisper carried on the winds of sorrow. "Why did you leave me?" The shattering dark closed in, and as the world around me spiraled into oblivion, I could only scream as the abyss consumed my vision. The clock continued its relentless tick-tock, and I knew there would be no escape. Would I become one of the whispers, lost forever in the groan of the brothel? Before I could succumb to the shadows, an ice-cold hand gripped my throat, and with a jolt, I was pulled from the depths of despair and thrown into a room I hadn't seen before, an attic filled with dusty memories where the whispers told of sinister truths unspoken, and the air held the stench of anguish anew. What fresh horrors awaited me here? And as I looked around, I felt a cold gaze upon me. Someone or something was watching, waiting. The air in the attic was thick with the scent of mold and rotting wood, mingling with a metallic tang that sent waves of nausea rolling through my stomach. Dust motes danced in the ghostly light that filtered through the cracked window pane, illuminating the scene like a twisted frame of a forgotten memory. My heart thundered in my chest, drumming out a rhythm of dread as I turned slowly, trying to catch even the slightest glimpse of what or who might be lurking within the corners of this forsaken space. The walls were adorned with faded photographs, their edges curling with age, each frame a window into lives long extinguished. Women with bright smiles and wide eyes stared back at me, their expressions captured in moments of joy, bliss untarnished by time. But as I moved closer, the joy faded. The eyes in those portraits seemed to follow me, filled not just with life but with an unsettling vitality, as if they were conscious of the horror that had befallen them. My breath quickened as whispers slithered into my ears, ghostly echoes of laughter now twisted with sorrow, snippets of conversations snapping around me. "Help us find the key," they hissed, each word a thread tugging at the fabric of my sanity. Suddenly, a chilling gust swept through the room, extinguishing the light and plunging me into a suffocating darkness. I stumbled back, heart racing, trying to steady myself against the rough wood of the wall. The whispers escalated, shrieks of despair and anguish that threatened to splinter my mind. "They're here. They're watching." A voice screamed, drawn out like a fragile thread about to snap, and then, in the silence that followed the chaos, I felt a presence, cold and overwhelming, hovering in the corners of the attic like a specter waiting to strike. The very air seemed to thrum with unease, electricity crackling as shadows writhed against the walls, twisting like tendrils of smoke. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the veil of darkness that enveloped me. Guided by a primal instinct, I felt my way across the room, gripping the edges of the furniture, steadying myself against the dread growing deeper within me. I could hear it now, the low murmur of voices calling my name, a cacophony layering over each other, screaming for liberation. Every fiber of my being urged me to flee, to escape the malignant grasp of whatever cursed this place. Yet something anchored me, a determination to confront the shadows that entangled this maddening web. That I stumbled past a tall, dusty wardrobe, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse under my touch. As I reached out to examine them, the door creaked open almost as if compelled by invisible hands. Within, a gold-brimmed mirror shimmered, beckoning me to peer into its depths. As I hesitated, the whispers grew frenzied, layering in pitch and urgency. "Look. You must look." Trembling, I leaned closer, my heart thrumming violently as if ready to burst. The reflection shimmering back was distorted, revealing not just my own image but glimpses of the women captured in the frames, haunting figures wailing behind me, pleading behind layers of pain. Their mouths moved in silent screams as the room around me began to pulse and warp, the air thickening further, coiling around my throat like a noose. I recoiled, struggling to comprehend the vision, desperate to escape the nausea twisting my gut. Suddenly, I caught sight of one figure among the chaos, a woman with familiar features, her eyes wide with something between yearning and terror. Her voice cut through the din and pierced my soul as she whispered my name. "Help me, you must help us." Struggling through the tumultuous din, I could feel her spectral fingers reach from behind the veil, grazing my own in an ethereal caress. A shiver cascaded down my spine, electric and bone-chilling. "Who are you?" I croaked, voice barely breaking free from the choking darkness that sought to reclaim me. "I am the key." Her eyes glimmered with an unearthly light. "But to set us free, you must face the truth." As she spoke, the mirror shimmered, and the attic erupted into chaos. The very floor trembled beneath my feet, books fell from their shelves, the whispers growing frantic as the haunting shadows surged closer. I steeled myself for whatever loomed in the abyss, my resolve hardening as uncertainty clutched at my spine. But before I could respond, the mirror shattered, shards flying like jagged teeth, and in that same heartbeat, a loud crushing sound filled the room. The walls began to shake, dust cascading from ceilings as I twisted to take in the moment, realizing far too late that it wasn't just the mirror that would shatter but reality itself. The attic door slammed shut behind me, a fog creeping in as shadows sprawled towards me from all angles. The vision of the woman faded into the chaotic din, leaving only her haunting words echoing in the whirlwind of terror around me. "Face the truth, face the darkness." And with that final warning reverberating in my mind, the ceiling cracked open, a piercing white light emerging from the fracture, blinding me momentarily. I staggered back, heart racing, as I heard a voice float down through the rift calling, demanding, "Come find us, find your own truth with every ounce of will." I turned toward the encroaching darkness, my fate intertwined with the horrors that awaited me. And just as the shadows congealed into a solid mass, the light flickered, revealing a figure shrouded in a cloak of despair, eyes ablaze with furious intent. "Why do you resist?" it whispered, and the room felt as if it was consumed by the very essence of dread itself. "You belong here with us." And before I could scream, the darkness surged, grasping at my limbs, dragging me toward the void from which the voices emanated. I was ensnared, pulled into the spectral embrace of those who had vanished before me, the bondage of the Everhart sisters clutching tighter than the shadows around us. The last glimmer of hope faded, replaced with unimaginable terror, as I knew I would face the truth, the treachery that lay hidden within the shadows, and the ghastly price that awaited those who dared to seek it. I stood in the attic, heart pounding in sync with the frantic pounding of the shadows, vision flickering between the light and the darkness, my mind spinning with impossibilities. It was then I felt the earth tremble beneath me, the darkened walls of the brothel pulsating as though the very building was filled with a heartbeat of its own, alive with unseen torment. "You belong to us." The room howled, echoing with the cries of despair, the very essence of the Everhart sisters swirling around me, threading through memories wrapped in anguish that in the cacophony, I could almost discern the identity of the voices as they mingled, overlapping with fear and longing, a haunting reminder of lives once vibrant now twisted into shackles of sorrow. A coldness enveloped me, creeping into my bones like ice, instantly reminding me of the desperate faces, the lost souls yearning to escape the fate intertwined with this old building of horrors. "Face the truth," a voice urged, rising above the din, sharp enough to slice through the web of fear that cocooned me. I spun around, gripping onto a broken chair for support as the oppressive shadows closed in like a monstrous maw, ready to swallow me whole. Gathering every last shred of resolve, I flung myself toward the golden-brimmed mirror. The lingering hands of shadow tangled with my consciousness, a remembrance of terror and despair blanketing my skin. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, every lingering second strung taut with anticipation of a truth I was not ready to grasp. The surface of the mirror rippled violently, shadows slithering across my reflection, distorting my features into a grotesque semblance of fear and sorrow. I felt the suffocating dread of the Everhart sisters wrap around me like a swirling tempest, their souls colliding with my own, drawing out the darkness I had never accepted as mine. "You must understand," a voice cried, echoing within the cavern of my heart. "You are the key. You have always been." And then their faces flashed before me, beautiful and broken, a haunting rhythm of tragedy long past. I reconsidered the key, my fingers trembling. What truth lay buried in my own heart that tied me to their suffering? Was I truly here to save them or to understand the hell from which they could never escape? Suddenly, time fractured, the clock's hands moving painfully slow as the echoes of midnight began to toll. It became clear if I wanted to confront whatever malevolence reigned here, to unearth the dark roots grown from despair, I had to choose, to sever the bonds of the cursed, or to embrace the darkness and join this tortured sisterhood, find the truth. They urged, pure desperation spilling from their lips, the weight of their unfulfilled lives pushing me toward an awakening I resisted. Gritting my teeth, I surged back against the shadows, pushing through the tears that fought to spill, a battle against the very essence of their mournful fate. With a fierce shove toward the mirror, I lunged in a plunge into a swirling vortex of memory, time spinning backward in haunting reels of light and dark. Faces of the women whisked by, reliving moments of laughter, love, loss, and betrayal, the bitter taste of each memory tainting the air thick with depression, lives stolen, dreams shattered. A flicker of connection surged through me, frantic and desperate, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the world wrenched back into existentia, throne room draped in splendor, once radiant but tainted by darkness. There she stood, the figure of the eldest sister, her eyes glimmering with a haunting recognition. You. Everything fell silent. The shadows bathed in an eerie stillness, waiting with bated breath, and I realized the truth twinkled like the shards at my feet. It was not solely hers but entwined with my own. You've come back to finish what you started, haven't you? She hissed, the echo of twisted farewell hanging between us like a noxious fog. You always belonged here. The truth struck me with visceral force. I dropped to my knees, the memories bombarding me like waves crashing against despair-laden rocks. The abandoned laughter echoed around me, and in that moment, I saw it all, the way memories had twisted into a grotesque tableau of pain, of suffering bound together like a package left unopened. Suddenly, everything clicked. The many women, their spirits trapped, lost before me. Each fragment of their stories, the heartbreak, the betrayals, they were me. The dark entity I fought, the despair, it was my own fear of abandonment and pain, grasping me as it had grasped them. You must let go. The eldest sister cried, falling to her knees, a plea ignited by the truth that wrapped its tendrils around us all. Only then can we be free, and as the clock tolled its final bell, illuminating that cruel, eternal truth, darkness writhed around me, ready to suffocate whatever flicker of hope remained. Face it. I screamed, wrenching away from the shadows and pushing toward the mirror. A rift tore open, sucking me into a maelstrom of confusion and despair, yet something within me ignited a sparkle of light breaking through. I saw my own reflection ripple, the flashes of lost laughter mingling with pain, and in that realization, I stepped back into the light. Let us free you, the sisters cried, their voices now bolstered, amalgamating into a resolute chorus echoing with clarity. You are the truth interpreted. Do not embrace their shadows. As I stretched toward the mirror, the jagged shards reflected all faces, my hand steady, the darkness lashing out in panic, desperation tearing at its seams. But then, the truth erupted. No. I will not let fear consume me. Join us. The darkness screeched in a fevered frenzy, echoing my own unfounded connections to the ghosts of my past, desperately clawing for control, and I broke free. I embraced the very memories I feared, every tear, every sliver of doubt, every fragment of my soul intertwined with theirs, and as the darkness collapsed to reveal the dormy past and theirs weaving together in a resolution illuminated in pure, blinding light, the whispers ceased. The chaos turned to serene silence, and I emerged from the veil of despair, breathing anew. But even as the sisters faded, a single truth hung unmoving: the darkness would always linger, waiting for an unwitting soul to err again. As I stood there, a chill skimming my spine, I turned to leave when the whispers returned, distant, yet calling. Remember us, for evil does not vanish, it merely lies in wait. And I turned, an icy tremor slipping through the air as the very walls groaned in recognition. And from the shadows, I heard a familiar voice, haunting and wispy, a reminder echoing through time: we shall meet again.